Something unexpected happened with W.G. Grace, and for a long time, no one fully understood what it meant. At first, it looked like dominance. Then it looked like consistency. Eventually, it became clear that it was something far deeper. This is not just a story about a great cricketer. It is the story of how one individual quietly changed the foundation of an entire sport. Cricket existed long before Grace, but it lacked structure, intent, and modern discipline. Matches were played, records were kept, yet the game itself had not been fully defined. Grace stepped into this uncertainty and began shaping it through his actions rather than his words. What followed was not immediate recognition, but gradual transformation. What you are about to hear explains how W.G. Grace became more than a player. It reveals how his behavior, mindset, and approach forced cricket to evolve. Every detail matters, because without him, modern cricket may never have existed in the form we know today. To understand the true importance of W.G. Grace, it is necessary to understand the world of cricket into which he emerged. 19th century cricket was rooted in tradition rather than structure. Matches were organized loosely, preparation was casual, and performance depended largely on natural ability. Training routines were rare. Tactical thinking was minimal, and the idea of long-term consistency barely existed. Cricket was respected, but it was not yet refined. Grace entered this environment with a fundamentally different mindset. From the beginning, he treated cricket as a discipline that demanded preparation, control, and deliberate effort. He practiced with intention, focusing on balance, timing, and shot selection. Where others relied on instinct, Grace relied on repetition. Where others accepted inconsistency, he demanded reliability from himself. What truly separated Grace was his understanding of influence. He recognized that cricket was not decided by isolated moments, but by sustained pressure applied over time. His batting reflected patience rather than impulse. His bowling showed awareness of rhythm and fatigue. His fielding demonstrated anticipation rather than reaction. As his performances accumulated, Grace's presence began to reshape the sport around him. Opponents altered tactics specifically to contain him. Teams built strategies around his availability. Matches increasingly felt defined by whether Grace was in control or not. Without announcement or authority, he became the central reference point of the game. Importantly, Grace never demanded change. He embodied it. His discipline exposed the limitations of casual preparation. His consistency raised expectations naturally. Cricket began evolving because it had no choice. Grace did not simply succeed within the game. He quietly redefined what success required. The unusual nature of W.G. Grace's behavior became evident not through spectacle, but through repetition and discipline. He trained longer than others, practiced more deliberately, and treated preparation as essential rather than optional. In an era where most players relied on habit and tradition, this level of commitment appeared excessive and unnecessary. Grace approached batting with methodical control. Instead of merely defending or reacting, he imposed structure on his innings. He chose shots with purpose, adjusted his stance and positioning, and adapted his approach based on conditions. This was not instinct alone, it was calculation. His batting displayed patience when others relied on impulse, and restraint when others chased momentum. His bowling and fielding reflected the same mindset. Grace positioned himself intelligently, anticipating play rather than responding late. He understood angles, movement, and timing with clarity. When matches grew chaotic, his presence created order. The game slowed or accelerated according to his involvement. What made this behavior truly unusual was consistency. Grace did not alter his standards based on opposition, venue, or importance. Whether the match was significant or routine, his preparation remained the same. This created a visible contrast. While others fluctuated in focus, Grace remained stable. Observers gradually sensed that Grace was not adapting to cricket, he was shaping it. His seriousness forced others to reconsider their own habits. What once seemed excessive slowly became necessary. Without challenging tradition openly, Grace was transforming it through example alone. As W.G. Grace continued to dominate, confusion followed admiration. Players, officials, and commentators attempted to explain his success using familiar logic. Some argued that his physical strength gave him an unfair advantage. Others suggested that the quality of opposition was insufficient. A few believed his dominance would fade once novelty disappeared. None of these explanations survived sustained observation. Grace performed across different teams, conditions, and years. Attempts to identify weaknesses repeatedly failed. The more closely he was examined, the less traditional reasoning applied. His success was not situational, it was systematic. Administrators grew uneasy. Grace's commitment blurred the boundary between amateur ideals and professional discipline. His preparation raised uncomfortable questions about effort, fairness, and expectation. Yet nothing he did violated rules or customs directly. There was no justification to restrain him. Opponents developed specific plans to neutralize him. Grace adapted. Critics waited for decline. It never arrived. Every attempt to explain him within the old framework collapsed. Eventually, it became clear that nothing was wrong with Grace. The problem was cricket itself. The sport lacked the language and structure to explain what he represented. Grace was not an anomaly. He was a preview of cricket's future. He was not breaking tradition. He was advancing it faster than understanding could keep up. Despite criticism, confusion, and growing pressure, one element of W.G. Grace's approach never changed. He remained fixated on control. Not control for personal dominance alone, but control over how cricket itself was played. This fixation became the central tension of his career and the point at which tradition and progress collided. Grace focused relentlessly on shaping outcomes rather than reacting to them. He believed that matches could be directed through patience, preparation, and sustained authority. This belief separated him from his contemporaries, who often accepted uncertainty as inevitable. Grace did not. He treated uncertainty as something to be reduced through discipline. This fixation placed him under constant scrutiny. The more he imposed structure on the game, the more resistance he encountered. Critics accused him of taking cricket too seriously. Traditionalists worried that his approach threatened the spirit of the sport, yet Grace refused to retreat. His standards did not soften even when opposition intensified. The problem point emerged clearly. Cricket depended on him more than it wanted to admit. Matches revolved around his presence. Expectations rose whenever he played. When Grace was absent, the contrast was obvious. His fixation had created reliance. Physically and mentally, this carried cost. Sustaining authority across long periods demanded endurance and focus. Grace accepted this burden willingly. To him, leadership meant responsibility, not restraint. He believed that excellence required commitment beyond comfort. The suspense lay not in whether Grace could continue influencing cricket, but in how far the game would be forced to follow him. Tradition resisted change, yet performance demanded it. Grace stood at the center of this conflict, holding his ground through consistency rather than confrontation. This fixation was not obsession, it was conviction, and it was reshaping cricket in ways that could no longer be reversed. The first undeniable clue that W.G. Grace was transforming cricket appeared not through a single performance, but through imitation. Slowly, almost unconsciously, others began to follow his example. Players arrived earlier, practice sessions grew longer, attention to technique increased. What had once been viewed as excessive preparation became increasingly common. This shift was subtle but significant. Grace had not issued instructions or demanded reform. His influence operated through necessity. Competing with him required adaptation. Opponents who failed to prepare properly found themselves exposed. Teammates who matched his discipline discovered improvement. The game began responding to his standards rather than resisting them. Selectors and administrators noticed changes as well. Expectations evolved. Consistency became valued. Fitness, once secondary, gained importance. Tactical thinking expanded. Cricket was no longer satisfied with momentary brilliance. Sustained performance became the benchmark. The clue was clearest in how matches felt. Games involving grace appeared more structured, more deliberate. Momentum was shaped, not surrendered. Decisions carried weight. The contest extended beyond instinct into planning. Cricket was beginning to resemble a modern sport. What made this moment decisive was its permanence. The changes did not disappear when grace was absent. They remained. His methods had taken root. The sport had absorbed his influence. This was the turning point. Grace was no longer an individual exception. He was the catalyst. Cricket had crossed a threshold without ceremony or declaration. The transformation was already underway, guided by example rather than authority. The first clue revealed the truth clearly. Grace had not merely dominated cricket, he had set it on a new path. The full truth about W.G. Grace eventually became impossible to ignore. His significance was not limited to records, victories, or longevity. The real revelation was that cricket itself had been reorganized around his standards. What once appeared to be personal discipline had become structural change. Grace did not introduce reform through rules or authority. He introduced it through behavior. His preparation, consistency, and understanding of influence redefined what excellence meant. Over time, these qualities stopped being exceptional and started becoming expected. Cricket's identity shifted quietly but permanently. The big reveal lay in recognition. Observers began to understand that grace represented a dividing line between eras. Before him, cricket relied heavily on tradition and instinct. After him, the game demanded structure, preparation, and sustained control. He bridged that gap without ever naming it. His influence extended beyond technique. Grace changed how players thought. Matches became contests of strategy rather than endurance alone. Fitness mattered, focus mattered, responsibility mattered. These were not temporary adjustments. They became foundational principles. Most importantly, Grace proved that seriousness did not destroy cricket's spirit. It strengthened it. The game gained clarity, competitiveness, and consistency. What critics once feared as excess became the sport's strength. This revelation confirmed what time would make permanent. W.G. Grace did not simply play cricket at a higher level, he redefined the level itself. Modern cricket exists because he behaved as if it already should. W.G. Grace's story delivers a lasting lesson. Progress does not always arrive through rules or reforms. Sometimes it arrives through example and consistency. Grace showed that discipline reshapes tradition, that intention raises standards, that one individual acting with clarity and commitment can redefine an entire system. Modern cricket exists because Grace treated the game as something worthy of structure and respect before anyone else did. His awareness came before acceptance. His actions came before explanation. That is why W.G. Grace is remembered not only as a great cricketer, but as the man who invented modern cricket.